Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really important, but maybe a bit under the radar. How company boards, the people at the top, play a huge role in stopping corruption. Our plan is to figure out why boards are often called the institution's most underutilized safeguard, and how they can shift from just talking the talk to, well, actually taking responsibility.
Yeah, and our main guide for this is the AACI Dispatch. That's issue number 2 from June 2025, put out by the American Anti-Corruption Institute, or ACI. And this issue, it doesn't pull any punches. It basically says, look, if boards aren't leading with integrity, corruption doesn't just sneak in, it actually thrives. So let's just jump right in. Okay, so when you think of a board, maybe you picture people in suits, kind of distant, right? Figureheads almost. But what does the ACI actually say about what the boardroom's role should be in this fight?
Yeah, it's easy to think of them that way, isn't it? But this ACI dispatch, it's very clear. It says the boardroom is no longer neutral ground. It is the first and final line of defense against corruption.
Wow. Okay. First and final. That sounds serious.
It is. And it's not just like a nice idea. These board members, they're legal fiduciaries. That means they have a real legal duty to act in the organization's best interest.
Enforceable responsibilities.
Exactly. Enforceable. So if they stay quiet, if they don't act when they should, they could actually be enabling corruption. And here's the kicker. They can be held personally accountable.
Personally?
By who?
By regulators, by courts, all around the world. It completely changes the game from just overseeing things from afar to being right there on the front line.
That is a heavy responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So if the boardroom is this battlefield, like you said, what's their main weapon? The AACI talks about something called preventative oversight. What's that about?
Right, preventive oversight. The ACI basically says this is non-negotiable. It means boards shouldn't just be reacting when a scandal hits the news.
They need to get ahead of it.
Exactly. They need to actively work to prevent it from happening in the first place. This is actually principle number 7 of their 10 principles of fighting corruption. They call it quantification of corruption exposure.
Quantification. So like putting numbers on it.
Pretty much. It means boards have got to demand real clarity on where the organization is vulnerable. They need actual metrics.
Okay, like what kind of metrics?
Well, things like weaknesses in internal controls, any irregularities in how they buy things, procurement, dealing with high-risk partners, transactions that look fishy, patterns in whistleblowing tips, findings from audits.
So concrete stuff.
Yes, concrete stuff.
Yeah.
Because their point is, what is not measured will not be managed, and certainly not prevented. It's a real call to action for boards to treat corruption risks seriously, just like they treat financial risk. Move beyond just talking about ethics to looking at the hard data.
That makes sense. You can't just say you're against corruption. You have to measure the risk, track it, manage it. But, we've all seen companies with thick policy books, codes of ethics, everything, and they still have massive scandals.
Oh, absolutely.
So why does that happen? Is it just that nobody follows the rules, or is there something more going on? The AACI uses this term, performative integrity. What's that about?
That's such a key distinction they make. So many places fall into what the ACI calls performative compliance. They have the policies, they tick the boxes, the code of ethics is on the website.
But it's just for show.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no real follow-through. Real integrity, the dispatch argues, has to be demonstrated, not just declared. The boardroom, it sets the whole tone, the ethical altitude, as they put it, for the entire organization.
Ethical altitude, I like that.
Yeah. And if that genuine commitment isn't coming from the very top, well, it's just not going to filter down. It won't stick.
Okay, so integrity needs to be shown, not just talked about. Makes total sense. But what does that actually look like in a boardroom? How do boards get past the rhetoric and actually do this performative integrity thing?
It means being active, not passive. Boards need to actually apply pressure, not just, rubber stamp policies.
So asking tough questions.
Asking tough questions, yes. Making sure the budget actually supports ethical goals.
Yeah.
Following up properly when internal audit finds red flags, not just noting them. They should be making ethical performance a key metric right alongside the financial numbers. Every big decision budgets, hiring top executives, setting up procurement systems needs to be looked at through an ethical lens.
Like, does this decision align with our values? Is this executive known for integrity?
Exactly. Is this budget transparent? Are our procurement processes fair and open? Those are the kinds of questions boards need to be asking constantly if they're serious about integrity.
And if they don't do that, the consequences of that negligence, they can be massive, right? What examples does the AACI bring up?
Oh, the consequences are huge and very real. Think about failed companies, reputations destroyed, people losing their jobs, their savings.
Yeah.
The ACACI points to disasters like Wirecard and Carillion. These weren't just about bad managers, they were also about boards that failed to act, that were inactive when critical oversight was needed.
So the board was asleep at the wheel, basically.
In many ways, yes, and the dispatch puts it really powerfully. Silence is not neutrality, it is complicity. Stakeholders, now investors, employees, the public, they expect directors to be real guardians of integrity, not just names on a letterhead.
Okay, let's broaden this out a bit. The AACI has this section, Global Integrity Watch, and it seems to show this isn't just a corporate boardroom issue. The examples they give, they seem quite different, but maybe they highlight the same underlying problem.
That's exactly the point they're making. These aren't just random incidents. The AACI sees them as warning signs of institutional erosion.
Okay, so what kind of things are we talking about?
Well, they flag a few key examples from May 2025. First, audit failures. They mention KPMG resigning as the auditor for P&O Ferries.
Oh, P&O Ferries, right. They had that big controversy dismissing staff.
Exactly, and KPMG apparently couldn't resolve issues with their 2022 accounts. It just adds to the questions about auditor oversight and corporate accountability,
Okay, what else?
Then there's an example of political interference. In Turkey, in May 2025, authorities detained several mayors, mostly opposition figures linked to Istanbul's mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu.
Oh, yeah.
Now, İmamoğlu himself denies the charges against his associates and claims the president is using the courts to suppress opposition. This led to protests, market jitters. The government says it's about law enforcement. The opposition sees it differently. It highlights that tension.
Right. And a third example.
Yes, public trust eroded. In Mongolia, also in May 2025, there were significant anti-government protests.
What sparked those?
Reports about alleged extravagant spending by the prime minister's son, but it also tapped into wider anger about corruption, inequality, and sort of elite influence.
Yeah.
And this had real political fallout, like a party being kicked out of the ruling coalition.
So you've got an audit issue, political arrests, public anger over spending. They seem worlds apart, but what's the common thread that the ACI is pointing to here?
The common thread is that crucial governance systems, whether it's corporate auditing, judicial independence, or public accountability, are being put under pressure, they're being weakened, or maybe just flat out ignored.
And when that happens?
When oversight breaks down and power isn't checked, the ACI says corruption stops being just a risk. It practically becomes inevitable. These examples are like flashing red lights for how fragile integrity can be, not just inside companies, but across society.
That really puts it into perspective. But it does raise a question I bet a lot of listeners have. Is this intense focus on boards mainly for, the huge multinational corporations? What about all the small and medium-sized businesses, the SMEs? They're the backbone of most economies, right?
That's a fantastic question, and yes, the AACI specifically addresses SMEs. It's a critical area. SMEs are vital, but they often fly under the radar when it comes to formal governance. Well, many don't have a formal board at all, or if they do, it might be more of an informal advisory group, maybe family members, not really providing independent oversight. This creates what the AACI calls governance gaps.
Gaps
Like the founder might make all the decisions, there's limited independent challenge, financial practices might be pretty informal, internal controls might be weak or non-existent.
Right, the owner is juggling everything.
Exactly. And in that environment, corruption, whether it's kickbacks, skimming money, dodgy procurement deals, it can find room to grow. The AACI essentially asks, who's asking the tough questions here? Who's checking the books? Who holds the owner accountable?
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
For a small business owner, setting up a formal board might feel like, corporate bureaucracy they don't need or have time for.
It might feel that way.
So for someone listening who runs or works for an SME, what are some practical things they can actually do? It doesn't have to be a giant board like a Fortune 500 company, right?
Absolutely not. Even small steps can make a huge difference. The AACI suggests some really achievable things. First, formalize a board structure. Seriously, even just 2 or 3 people meeting regularly makes a difference.
Okay.
Second, assign oversight responsibilities. Make it clear who on that small board is responsible for looking at the finances, checking procurement, keeping an eye on compliance.
Give people specific jobs.
Right. Third, keep meeting records. Just simple notes on decisions create accountability. Fourth, review key financial reports. Look at the income statement, who's getting paid, expense reports, basic checks.
Makes sense.
Fifth, have conflict of interest policies. especially crucial in SMEs where business and personal lives often overlap. And sixth, insist on internal controls. Simple things like needing 2 signatures on checks over a certain amount or separating who approves payments from who makes them.
These sound like things even a very small business could implement.
They really are, and the AACI contrasts 2 examples. A mid-sized construction firm where lack of oversight led to normalized corruption and eventually big trouble, versus a small service company that set up a small board, did quarterly reviews, had a way for employees to report concerns anonymously, and they caught a costly conflict of interest early.
So the difference wasn't how big they were.
No, the difference was oversight. It's not a luxury for SMEs. It's really a survival tool. It helps protect the business long term. And the AACI actually has specific tools and certifications like CACF and CSE aimed at helping SMEs build this capacity.
That's really helpful. Okay, so we've seen how vital board integrity is, and this isn't just a one-off idea in this dispatch, is it? You mentioned the AACI has a blog series called The Rod at the Top that digs into this too.
That's right. The Rod at the Top series really doubles down on these themes. It highlights 3 main points, basically.
Which are?
First, ignorance is complicity. Meaning, if a board doesn't know what's going on, that lack of knowledge itself helps decay set in. They're enabling problems by not looking.
Okay, willful blindness isn't an excuse.
Exactly. Second, the tyranny within. This is about when power gets too concentrated in just a few board members, which can kill transparency and, allow bad behavior to hide.
Right, checks and balances are needed even at the top.
And third, they talk about the silent accomplices. These are the external players, lawyers, auditors, bankers, consultants who might see troubling signs but stay silent, or even help cover things up actively or passively.
Wow, so it's a whole ecosystem that needs integrity.
It really is.
This is incredibly sobering, honestly.
Yeah.
So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway for everyone listening? Whether you're actually on a board or run a small business, or maybe you just work somewhere and wonder about these things.
The core message from the AACI really is that this call for boards to step up applies everywhere, across all sectors. Boards need to see oversight as a strategic priority, not just a compliance chore.
So be proactive.
Be proactive. Quantify that corruption exposure we talked about. Demand real anti-corruption intelligence. Put measurable safeguards in place. The AACI is basically saying the future standard for boards won't be about the values they say they have, but the integrity they actually demonstrate. It's a shift from talk to action.
A powerful call for real change indeed. This has been fascinating. It really drives home that integrity isn't just something you declare, it's something you have to perform. And like we've discussed, the boardroom is where it starts, and maybe where it ends if it fails.
That sums it up perfectly. As the source says, if integrity does not begin in the boardroom, it is unlikely to survive anywhere else.
So a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe chew on. In your own world, whatever your role, big or small, what's one specific thing you could do to encourage that performative integrity we talked about and maybe challenge performative compliance when you see it?